Thanks so much. I want to tell you a brief story about why I came back to Canada this year to work on Canadian issues. I mean, partly it's already been said by my fellow panelists, but I was working for Greenpeace International, directing Greenpeace's global climate campaign, and primarily working in China and India and the Arctic. And I loved it. And I was meeting the most incredible people and feeling like I was doing really good work. And then a couple things happened. We decided to come home, but I would continue doing the international work because we were really missing Canada. And so we moved home, and one of the first nights I was here, we were at a dinner party. How many people remember that Minister Oliver letter in the Globe and Mail in last February? So if you didn't see it, it was an open letter to Canada from Minister Oliver, where he said that there was a group of radical extremists in Canada who were trying to destroy Canada's economy, that were funded by foreign influence, and these radical extremists were opposing pipelines that were essential for Canada, and basically framing anyone who had concerns about the dramatic expansion of the oil sands and the pipelines that are being proposed through to BC's coasts as being against Canada, against the national interest. And, you know, I remember seeing this and just, first of all, I was completely astonished. And then I was at a dinner party that night, and a friend of mine who is not at all involved in the environmental movement, she's a therapist, and she said she turned to the woman beside her and she said, you know, I'm really worried that I'm on some kind of list somewhere because I signed a thing against the Enbridge pipeline, and now I've seen this Oliver letter, and you know, and I'm really worried because I have to cross the border a lot for my work. And I just, all of a sudden, I remembered all those movies about the McCarthy era, you know, and it's like, I'm on some list somewhere because I've expressed my view. Like, this is the Canada that we live in? And then a couple of months later, there was a debate in the Senate. Some of you will remember it. My son, who was 8 at the time, happened to hear it on CBC because CBC was playing while my husband was making dinner. So I came home from work that night, and my son sat down to the dinner table, and he turned to me and put his hands on his, his face, and he goes, "So, Mommy, why does the government think you're a terrorist?" So that day in the Senate, really, how do you answer that question? So that day in the Senate, there had been a debate about whether or not environmentalism should be legally included in the definition of domestic terrorism in Canada.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the examples that were used to prove that this is necessary was the work of Forest Ethics, which is an organization I co-founded in the 90s and around 2000, and I'm still on the board of, and the work of Greenpeace. At the time, I was the international director of Greenpeace's climate program. So my son had made the connection and wanted to know, why the government thought I was a terrorist. So it was at that moment that I realized that we were fighting in Canada not only for our environment, and we were facing some serious rollbacks of environmental laws and a dramatic expansion of the oil sands, but that in fact we're fighting right now for the soul of Canada, for who we are, for our capacity to participate as citizens and engage in these issues. Democracy thrives in a system where there is widespread dissemination of knowledge, where we have support for rational scientific inquiry that can help us ensure we have the information we need to distinguish between effective policy and ineffective policy. So certain conditions are required in order to ensure that knowledge is shared and used to inform debate. We need transparency. We need mechanisms for public participation. We need the nonprofit sector to ensure that we have engagement across class and racial boundaries, that everyone can engage in these issues and get the information that they need. So I want to spend just a couple of minutes pulling this apart. In the last several years, we've experienced a dramatic suppression of knowledge in Canada and a really disturbing silencing of some of our most important economic and scientific experts. I think two of the most dramatic examples of this are the complete canceling, elimination of the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy in Canada. That happened a couple of months ago. It's shutting down actually this month. So the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy was created 16 years ago by a Tory government, actually, under Mulroney, to try and the last several years, the Energy has put out report after report showing that it is possible for Canada to reduce global warming pollution, our emissions, and to create a strong economy. That in order to do that, we need to make sure polluters pay. We need some form of cap and trade or carbon tax. And that, in fact, if we support other sectors like the manufacturing sectors and renewable energy, Canada can take the lead in developing a low-carbon economy. And the Harper government didn't like that message, so they shut it down. The reports also said that doing this is absolutely essential to saving money in the long term, consistent with the IEA reports and the World Bank reports and the UN reports over the last decade. Energy pointed out that for every dollar that we spend now fighting climate change and creating a low-carbon economy, we will save $4 in 10 years that we will have to spend on adaptation, on dealing with the impacts of catastrophic climate change. So they showed that it makes environmental and economic sense. The government didn't agree with that analysis, so they shut it down. Also this year, the government shut down the Climate and Atmospheric Science, the Foundation for Climate and Atmospheric Science in Canada. Now this is not just important to Canada, it's one of the most important bodies that governments and scientists globally look towards to show us the pace of global warming, to understand how close we are getting to dangerous atmospheric levels of carbon. It is essentially our canary in the coal mine. This government